Claire Summers had always lived her life with meticulous planning. As a recent finance graduate, she prided herself on being cautious and practical. But after her graduation party, she found herself in an unfamiliar setting that defied all sense of reason. The golden sunlight streaming through the windows only heightened the surreal feeling that something extraordinary had just happened. The morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow on the elegant penthouse she had woken up in. The room screamed luxury: silk sheets, polished marble floors, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Confusion and panic surged through Claire as she pieced together fragments of the previous night. This wasn't her modest apartment. Before her thoughts spiraled further, a polite knock on the open door made her freeze. Standing there was Alexander Kane, a man who exuded wealth and authority, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. His calm demeanor did little to settle her nerves. "Good morning," he greeted, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. His gaze, calm and observant, lingered on her for a moment before he continued. "I trust you're feeling better after last night." The kindness in his voice was unexpected. As Claire cautiously engaged in conversation, she learned that this wasn't just any stranger. It was Alexander Kane, the CEO of Kane Investments, a financial powerhouse. He wasn't a predator, but rather her protector from what could have been a disastrous night. The encounter left Claire grappling with 2 questions. Who was this man who had shown her such kindness? And why did fate decide to cross their paths in the first place? Claire felt the tension coursing through her as she sat up on the bed, her trembling hands clutching the silk sheets. Her head throbbed, and blurry memories of the previous night began to resurface. Her graduation party had started innocently enough, but her friend's insistence on more drinks and free cocktails from a group of strangers had quickly turned the evening into a haze. But now she wasn't in her familiar, modest apartment filled with IKEA furniture. Instead, she was surrounded by opulence, a space far beyond anything she'd ever known. "Would you like some coffee?" Alexander's deep, refined voice pulled her from her spiraling thoughts. Claire startled, turning to face him. The man before her looked like he had stepped out of a magazine. His tailored suit accentuated his tall, commanding presence. Alexander gently placed a cup of coffee on the bedside table, maintaining a polite distance to ensure she felt at ease. "I'm Alexander Kane," he introduced himself. "We met at the party last night. I'm not sure how much you remember, but a group of people was trying to take you with them when I noticed you'd had too much to drink. I couldn't let that happen." A chill ran down Claire's spine as she processed his words. The thought of what could have happened if he hadn't intervened made her shudder. "So, you brought me here?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "I did," he nodded, "but I slept in the living room. I just wanted to make sure you were safe." Claire sat quietly, trying to process everything. 22 years of life had taught her that kindness rarely came without strings attached. But there was something in Alexander's calm, sincere gaze that made her want to believe him. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice small but genuine. "You're welcome," Alexander replied, a faint smile softening his otherwise composed expression. "If you're feeling up to it, the kitchen has prepared breakfast. I think it might help you feel better." Claire stepped out of the room, hesitating as her steps led her to the elegant dining area. The expansive space with its modern furnishings and natural light felt like stepping into another world. Alexander was seated at the table, a coffee cup in hand, his composed demeanor making him seem perfectly at home. "Have a seat," he invited, gesturing to the chair across from him. In front of her was a lavish breakfast spread. Toast, fresh fruit, and eggs Benedict plated with precision. "You didn't have to go through all this trouble," Claire said, feeling a bit overwhelmed as she eyed the meal. "Think of it as an apology for deciding to bring you here without asking," Alexander replied smoothly, his eyes reflecting genuine sincerity. As they began eating, their conversation grew more relaxed. Claire was cautious at first, but Alexander's calm and polite manner helped her let her guard down. They spoke about life, work, and unfulfilled dreams. "You're not what I expected," Claire blurted out suddenly, her cheeks flushing as she realized how bold she sounded. For a moment, she considered backtracking, but the genuine curiosity in Alexander's eyes held her in place, making her feel strangely safe. Alexander set down his coffee, a curious expression crossing his face. What did you expect? People with your kind of money and power usually don't notice people like me, let alone help them, she admitted honestly. Alexander smiled, but it wasn't a mocking one. Maybe that's exactly why I noticed you. In my world, sincerity is a rare commodity. His words made Claire pause, her heart beating a little faster. She looked down at her plate, trying to ignore the strange feeling welling up inside her. Thank you. Again, she said finally, rising from her seat. But I think I should go. Alexander stood as well, nodding politely. I've already arranged a car to take you home, but if you ever need anything, here's my card. Claire accepted the business card, feeling a warmth where their fingers briefly touched. As she left, she told herself she would never need it, but deep down, she knew this was far from the end of their story. 2 weeks later, Claire stepped into the gleaming offices of Sterling Financial, the prestigious firm where she had just started her new job. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a perfect stepping stone for her career in finance. Her first day was filled with introductions to colleagues and learning the ropes of the company's culture. But the biggest surprise came mid-morning when she attended a meeting with the company's leadership team to discuss a major client. Our team is thrilled to be collaborating with Kane Investments on this project, the CEO announced. Claire froze as Alexander Kane entered the room, his commanding presence drawing everyone's attention. Dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, his piercing gaze scanned the room. For a brief moment, his eyes met hers, and Claire felt her heart skip a beat. Thank you for your partnership, Alexander said, his voice professional and composed. I believe this project will yield great results for both sides. Throughout the meeting, Claire struggled to focus, her thoughts drifting back to that morning in his penthouse. She wondered if he remembered her. After the meeting, Claire hurried out, only to hear a familiar voice call after her. Claire! She turned to find Alexander in the hallway. He offered her a faint smile, though his expression remained serious. I didn't expect to see you again so soon, he said. It's a small world, she replied, trying to sound calm. Before their conversation could continue, another voice interrupted. Alexander, aren't you going to introduce me? Standing there was Victor Reyes, a man around Alexander's age, but with a smile that made Claire uneasy. Victor was a competitor in the finance industry, and his presence carried an air of cold calculation. Victor, this is Claire Summers, Alexander said. She's recently joined the team at Sterling Financial. A pleasure to meet you, Victor said, his handshake lingering a moment too long. How interesting that Alexander seems to have taken such an interest in a new hire. Claire caught the subtle insinuation in Victor's words, and it made her uncomfortable to be the center of attention. Alexander, however, remained unfazed. Victor, we should get back to the meeting, Alexander said, his tone cooling. Claire watched them walk away, an uneasy feeling settling over her. She didn't know why, but something told her that her connection to Alexander would be far more complicated than she had anticipated. A week later, Claire received an unmarked envelope at her office. Inside was a stack of documents and a short note. Know who your new friend really is, before it's too late. Claire flipped through the papers. They contained allegations against Alexander, including controversial corporate mergers and questionable financial dealings. Her stomach tightened as she scanned the pages. While she couldn't verify their accuracy, she knew this was no coincidence. That evening, her phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She hesitated for a moment before answering. Miss Summers, Victor Reyes's cold, calculating voice came through the line. I trust you've received my materials. I think we should talk. About what? Claire asked, her voice steadier than she felt. About saving yourself from an unnecessary crisis, Victor replied, his tone dripping with smugness. Alexander isn't who you think he is. I have additional evidence that could ruin him, and you, if you continue to associate with him. The threat in Victor's words was unmistakable. What do you want from me? She demanded. Simple, he said, his voice smooth, as if discussing the weather. I need you to cooperate with me. Publicly confirm the story that Alexander exploited you, that he's behind shady dealings. You'll be safe, and I'll ensure your job remains secure. Claire felt her stomach drop, her grip tightening on the phone. The calmness in Victor's tone made the threat all the more chilling, like a predator toying with its prey. Claire gripped the phone tightly, her heart pounding. "And if I refuse?" Victor chuckled, a sound devoid of warmth. "Then those documents will find their way to the press, along with some photos from that fateful evening. Think carefully, Ms. Summers. You have 24 hours. Claire sat frozen, feeling as though she'd been pulled into a game she didn't know how to play. She wasn't just protecting herself. She also had to decide if she could trust Alexander in the face of these mounting threats. Claire knew she couldn't face this alone. As soon as she hung up the phone, she pulled out the business card Alexander had given her. After hesitating for a few seconds, she finally dialed his number. "Claire?" Alexander's voice on the other end was filled with concern. "We need to talk," she said, trying to steady the tremor in her voice. An hour later, Alexander arrived at Claire's small apartment. He sat silently as she explained Victor's letter, the documents she had received, and his threats. His face darkened at the mention of Victor's name, his sharp eyes betraying his anger. "Victor is a master manipulator," Alexander said, his tone resolute. "He's done this before, but this time I won't let him win." "But he has evidence against you," Claire countered, worry lacing her words. "Those documents, if they're true." Alexander straightened, his expression serious but determined. "Claire, I have nothing to hide. The mergers Victor mentioned were all legal, even if they seemed ruthless at times. But I've never done anything illegal." Claire searched his eyes, looking for sincerity. "So what do we do?" "We tell the truth," Alexander replied. "Together. If Victor wants to fight with lies, we'll counter him with the truth." Claire nodded, her own resolve hardening. Together. The next morning, Claire and Alexander held a press conference, sharing their story with the media. Alexander spoke about Victor's relentless attempts to sabotage his business, while Claire recounted how she had been dragged into his schemes. "I never wanted to be part of this power play," Claire said, her voice clear and resolute. "But I can't stand by while the truth is distorted." Alexander followed, his gaze steady and determined. "Victor thought lies could destroy us, but the truth is the strongest weapon. We're ready to face anything, as long as we remain honest," Alexander said, his hand brushing against Claire's, a silent reminder that they were in this together. The press conference sent shockwaves through the media. Victor's documents were quickly proven to be forged, and Alexander's business dealings, though controversial, were entirely legal. Unable to deny the evidence against him, Victor was arrested by authorities for blackmail and document falsification. With the storm finally settling, Claire and Alexander could breathe a sigh of relief. Standing on the balcony of the penthouse, Claire gazed out over the city, feeling the weight of the ordeal lifting. "We did it," she said, turning to Alexander. "We did," he nodded, pride shining in his eyes. "But not because of me, it's because of you. Your courage changed everything." Not only had they overcome the challenges, but they had also built a stronger relationship through the trials they endured together. With the chaos behind them, Claire and Alexander decided to focus on their personal lives and long-term goals. Alexander proposed a meaningful idea, founding a nonprofit organization to support individuals harmed by financial manipulation, inspired by what they had endured. "We can use our experience to help others," Alexander told Claire. Excited by the idea, Claire took on the role of managing the organization. She applied her financial expertise and sharp instincts to build effective support programs. During this time, their relationship deepened. Although Alexander remained a busy man, he learned to balance his work with his growing love for Claire. Evenings were often spent cooking together, taking walks, and sharing dreams about their future. "I never thought I'd meet someone who would make me want to change," Alexander admitted one quiet evening. Claire smiled, holding his hand. "I never thought I'd trust anyone so easily, but we found each other, and that's all that matters." One special evening, Alexander brought Claire back to where it all began, his luxurious penthouse. As the city lights twinkled in the distance, he knelt down, holding out a sparkling ring. "Claire Summers, you've changed my life. You've shown me that true strength doesn't come from power or money, but from honesty and trust. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as Claire nodded. "Yes, I will." A few months later, Claire and Alexander celebrated their wedding in an intimate ceremony at the very hotel where they first met. The event was adorned with pristine white flowers and warm lighting, symbolizing their fresh start. Only their closest loved ones attended. Claire's mother, Mrs. Summers, glowing in an elegant blue gown, Helena, Alexander's sister, tearing up as she delivered a heartfelt toast, and Regina, Claire's best friend, playfully teasing her throughout the reception. As Claire walked down the aisle, hand in hand with her mother, Alexander waited for her with eyes full of love. "You are the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said during his vows. "And you are the one who made me believe that true love exists," Claire replied, tears shimmering on her cheeks. Around them, the soft glow of candlelight and the gentle rustle of flowers created a scene that felt almost dreamlike. After the wedding, they moved to a home by the beach, where they could build their new life in peace. A year later, Claire gave birth to twin girls, Isla and Sophia. Both children reflected the best qualities of their parents. Isla was curious and clever like Claire, while Sophia had Alexander's calm demeanor and quiet authority. The family often spent afternoons by the shore, playing together under the sunset. One evening, as Isla and Sophia built sandcastles, Claire turned to Alexander. "Did you ever think we'd have this?" Alexander wrapped an arm around her, his gaze soft as he watched their daughters. "I never dared to dream of it, but you made it all possible." They smiled, feeling the quiet contentment of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter filled with love, connection, and hope. Years later, Claire and Alexander's life had become a testament to the power of resilience and love. The nonprofit organization they founded had flourished, providing legal and financial support to those harmed by manipulation in the finance industry. Isla and Sophia grew up in a household filled with love and lessons about honesty. They weren't just the pride of Claire and Alexander, but carried forward the legacy of change their parents had created. One evening, as the family sat by the shore, Claire turned to Alexander, her eyes full of emotion. "Did you ever think that our differences, the things that seemed like barriers at first, would become our greatest strength?" Alexander smiled, taking her hand. "It's those differences that brought us together, and it's our unity that changed everything." As the sun set, Claire realized they had built more than just a family. They had created a legacy, a story of courage, honesty, and the power of two different people coming together to create something extraordinary.